CyberTruck looks like the sort of thing you'd only see in a science fiction movie, and a lot of people still believe it's exactly that. That it's too weird, too hard to manufacture, or has fundamental flaws that make it impossible to mass produce and sell to the public legally. So let's put the last batch of these to bed. Hopefully. If you missed part 1 of this series, you may want to check that out first, since that covers the bigger myths. Link in the description. Number 6. There won't be any accessories. You know, because the shape is unique and custom builders don't want to make custom stuff. Except that's literally all they do. The Honda Ridgeline sold miserably. Never more than a few thousand a month, yet you can buy canopies and toolboxes and every manner of accessory for it. But what about racks for hauling lumber or glass, or insert your peculiar niche here? Listen, or look if you prefer, the CyberTruck has sufficient demand to outsell years of Ridgeline on its first spec iteration. The accessories will follow, as they always do. But what about a toolbox behind the cab? I've always had one of those. Well, it was never a good solution, so luckily you have a better one. Put your tools in the frunk. My kids could pick your truck lock in under a minute, and a screwdriver would do it in half the time. You can't find half the stuff in there anyhow, 'cause it's too far out of view. The frunk fixes all of that. And by the way, 304 or 316 stainless can be welded to plain carbon steel using MIG or TIG welding. So, I mean, all your homebrew stuff should work just fine. It's likely whichever steel compound is finally chosen, it will also be weldable as well. But the bottom line is, if there's enough of these trucks on the road, there will be no shortage of aftermarket accessories for them, and they don't have to be any more expensive than the stuff you're already buying. Number 7. But the interior is clearly stamped. They can't make the whole thing out of stainless steel because the door jambs are clearly stamped. You know, as opposed to folded. Well, anyone who's worked in a restaurant kitchen can tell you there's an awful lot that can be fabricated with stainless steel. The reason the body can't be stamped is because it's too thick, but thinner stainless steel is routinely stamped. Everything but the kitchen sink can be stamped, including your kitchen sink. Seriously, go into any commercial kitchen and look around. Everything is stainless, and a lot of it has significant complexity. Only the outer shell needs to be so thick as to preclude the possibility of stamping. And now we're getting a bit into the weeds because I looked, and I mean I really looked to find every possible criticism of the CyberTruck, and what follows from here are honestly a bit silly. A big thanks to my Patreon supporters who got access to this video a full week early, as well as bonus material and a look behind the curtain for as little as $1 a month. Number 8. The Tonno can't be stainless steel. Well, why not? The skeptics say it's because the folds and machining are too complex, but that's not how steel, stainless or otherwise, works. Stainless steel rolling shutters already exist, and this is about precisely the same technology. It's likely this misunderstanding stems from the idea that the rolling vault cover would use the same thickness as the exoskeleton, though there's no reason to think it would, and no reason that it actually should. Number 9. Trucks have higher rollover risk. And also, maybe the passenger would be more likely to die in a rollover. Look, there's a reason I didn't cite any of these publications making these absolutely insane claims, and it's because at this point it would be like boxing a sloth. I'm self-invoking the slaughter rule. Yes, pickup trucks have an above-average rollover risk, just like SUVs do, but remember when they were testing the Tesla Model X and they couldn't get the damn thing to roll over? Yeah, it's like that. The bulk of the weight of any modern EV is going to be in the floorboards, so the center of gravity is very low, which substantially reduces the risk of a rollover. And as for the safety of the occupants in the unlikely event a rollover should occur, I'll remind you that the very structural integrity of the CyberTruck reaches an apex at its roof. For the roof to collapse, the entire vehicle would have to more or less split in half. Number 10, bad visibility / rearview mirror cams don't work. If you want to say that the rear window is tiny, I'm happy to agree. That's why modern vehicles have exterior cameras. If you think looking over your shoulder through a mess of kids in your Honda Odyssey is providing safety, maybe you should have your spouse throw out some obstacles, maybe some cones, and see how well you can spot them while you're moving. Because I'm going to tell you, it's not well. Some have argued they've seen vehicles with rearview camera mirrors in place of practical ones, but they're almost universally lying. They are extremely rare items, and the ones they've seen, if they have seen any at all, were likely prototypes at worst or very early designs at best. A 4K camera and screen configuration now costs under $100 at the wholesale level and can provide clarity equal to or greater than what the human eye could perceive from such a distance. The perspective is different, sure, but that takes like a day to adjust to, just like the mirrors in any new car that you would drive. Number 11, the headlights are illegal. No, they aren't. They may look like it because of the center light bar, but that's basically a fog light. It still has headlights on each side, and the center strip can be turned off, as seen here in pictures from like a million years ago. Number 12, it's too dystopian or not dystopian enough. This one's subjective. I saw a genuinely cringeworthy article where the author suggested the CyberTruck is too dystopian and intimidating in a time when that's counterproductive and that it sends the wrong message. Well, it does until it doesn't. Armored trucks being driven around by the police are pretty intimidating, but if my neighbor also drove one and had it wrapped to look like the mystery machine from Scooby-Doo, my opinion would shift. These aren't going to be rare. They'll be as common as mail trucks within months and as common as minivans within a year. When I lived close to the airport, I became immune to seeing Chevy Caprice headlights behind me as a threat because I came to understand they were always taxis rather than squad cars. The same desensitization occurs with anything that becomes common. Hummers were psychologically inseparable from the first Gulf kerfuffle until they became available to consumers. Thanks, Arnold. Even the almighty Jeep was exclusively a tool of the military for a very long time, but virtually no one thinks of them that way today. The flippity-flop of the same token says that they aren't scary enough, that they're only bulletproof up to 9mm and the windows can still shatter. Well, you know, it's still just a truck. Both of those are apparently unintended benefits to the overall design, not the point of it. I guess try not to get in any shootouts? I mean, that remains my advice regardless of what you drive though, so remember that. If there are any clear, obvious, undeniable design flaws I missed, leave them in the comments, and if there are enough of them, I'll make a third part to this series, either admitting you are right or explaining why you're mistaken. Number 13, it's too ugly. Well, a lot of people said that about your mom, but yet here you are. And as insulting as that sounds, it's not, because I love you all dearly, especially those who stuck around this late in the video, and I mean that. To clarify, your mom, with all her odd angles and bulk, is still a lovely woman, and no matter what the objective standards of beauty may be, there are plenty who still agree that she's a gem. If Daryl Hannah was able to trick millions into thinking she's pretty, the CyberTruck will be an easy sell. Number 14, Contractor, a boycott. Contractors will never buy the CyberTruck because, insert your hyper-specific niche case here. I mean, maybe? The complaints I've read have been wildly varied, with few universal themes repeating, so there are two responses to this. The first is, some contractors will still buy it. With pickup trucks being the first, second, and third most common makes of automobile in the US, the market is genuinely vast. If it doesn't work for me, that doesn't mean it doesn't work for anyone. Even if we're just looking at the market for buyers who never take their truck off-road and never use it to haul anything more than a random couch every 2 years, it still represents more units than could realistically be built in the first 2 years of production. But it will work for some contractors, possibly even most. The bed height is already on par with other trucks with less ground clearance, plus the air suspension allows it to get even lower for loading and unloading. If your custom racks won't fit, get ones that will. At the end of the day, no single vehicle can be perfect for everyone. My brother is a contractor and had to search for ages to find an older, full-size van because they don't make them in the same form factor as they used to. They're all Sprinter transit vans now, and those count as overheight vehicles on the ferry, which would make them a no-go for him from a financial perspective. What he really, really needs already doesn't exist. And while the shape of the CyberTruck also won't work for him, the point remains. You can't please everyone. Number 15, towing problems. You can't tow over 100 miles. Well, this kind of depends on what you're towing and which CyberTruck you get. EV owners routinely get around 50% of their stated range while towing. If you keep the speed to a safe and reasonable, legal level, the wind resistance benefit from going 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometers, instead of 80 miles an hour, 135 kilometers, is going to be a lot kinder to you than you think. Contrary to what you might believe, range on a dyno combustor is similarly diminished, though it's less noticeable if you only need 10 minutes to gas up every 2 hours instead of 20 or 30. The top spec CyberTruck should get 500 miles of range without a load, thus 250 miles with a reasonable trailer attached. That's still 4 hours at the speed limit. You may even pick up additional benefit from the hyper-aerodynamic wedge, since drag can be pretty punishing on traditional pickups as speed increases the airflow over the open bed. The legitimate complaint here is that there are currently few, if any, pull-through EV charging options, though that's something you could expect to see change rapidly once these begin hitting the market. It's true that if you had to unhook every time you needed to top off, it would almost surely be a deal breaker. But on day 1, and really through day 300 to 800, this may not be so much of an issue, considering how few use their pickups to haul anything more than a couple hundred miles at a time. By then, things will be a bit better sorted out. Along with the towing concern is that you can't haul a fifth wheel trailer without a solid frame to attach it to. Well, that may be true, we don't know yet, but if the bed is genuinely super thick stainless steel that's a structural component, welding a plate to it would likely be as good as going straight to a traditional frame. It would likely render the subvault unusable, but if that's your use case, no harm in losing a space you never had before anyhow. So if you've made it this far, my gosh, you're the best. Leave a comment letting me know your thoughts and concerns, because I will read every last one of your comments. So stay tuned, stay juicy, and I can't wait to hear from you clever robots, even those of you who sound a lot more like a fax machine.